What up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd J Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Shows. Brian, episode 4. I've had mixed feelings about this episode, even though it was very entertaining and it was great. But it makes me worried about other things. But I really enjoyed this episode, Brian. What did you think of this episode 4?
Well, I think this commentary is going to have a number of angles because after this episode came out, we got a lot more commentary from Jon Bernthal about what went into his return as Punisher, which I think we have to talk about. We got Ted Sarandos off the top rope at Netflix, crushing Marvel over how difficult it was to make seasons 1, 2, and 3. So we got to talk about that, I think. And then maybe we got to talk a little bit about Daredevil as sort of Disney in microcosm, especially in light of, even though it's not, IP, but Snow White turning into a box office and PR disaster for Disney as this is going on. So episode 4 of Daredevil, I sent you this tagline and I really have a lot of things to say about this. And I think they're both kind of hot takes. I think this is the best episode of the show in a number of key reasons. So I'm higher on some of those key reasons than I've seen a lot of people that have written many more mixed reactions to this episode. So I actually think it's the best episode of the show in a lot of ways. But it's also the episode to me that's certified that Disney ruined this. It will not be able to save it relative to where Netflix left the show, which I realize sounds like, how can you have both of those in the same episode? But I'll try to flesh it out. So here's my pitch to you on why this is the best episode of the show and why this should have been the first episode of the show. Okay. This show has assumed from the very beginning that a lot of people have seen seasons 1, 2, and 3. There's a lot of assumption that the emotional beats, the things you're supposed to care about, you care about because you already know what's going on. I think this episode does the best job of dropping you into the different characters' places in the storylines while leaving you with a lot of questions that you need to be answered, which to me is a really good formula for a premiere. So we get reintroduced to Matt. I want to get to this because I think it's a horrific scene, but we get introduced to him where he's sort of trying to defend this sort of petty thief. And that's the system is insufficient, right, for Matt. We get introduced to Fisk in almost a comedic way as the mayor, where he's sort of dealing with the kids singing and then the Latvian group singing and I'll get to the flaws of Fisk, but we get dropped into here's where Fisk is, right? And we get a little Vanessa as well with a therapy session, but we kind of get those pieces. We get dropped into Frank Castle in what's clearly the best part of the episode. And we get dropped into our new villain in Muse. Mm-hmm. To me, there's a lot of references in this episode to things that have happened. Foggy, for example, is right. Your friend, say his name. We'll get to that. To me, had this been the first episode, at the very least, to me, each one of these vignettes is somewhat interesting as a launch point for these characters. And in the future episodes now, you would have been free to both live with them in the moment and do something the Netflix show did very well and did a lot of, which is flashback to fill in the narrative. So structurally is why I think this was the episode that should have been the premiere and should have been the one to try to hook you, even though it does not feature Matt in the suit. And I know you have thoughts on that. But it does feature Matt training to be in the suit, which I think would have been enough for a first episode to get you, and you see the masks. It would have been enough as a teaser in the first episode to let you know who was coming. That's my pitch on the positive side for why Disney made a huge mistake in making this episode 4. This should have been episode 1. For all of its flaws, this should have been episode 1.
I mean, it's a difficult choice to make. I see what you see. I do, because that episode was sort of made me forget almost a little bit about the first 3, right? And what happened to Foggy. Imagine that would have been the first episode. Everybody would have been like, what happened to Foggy?
Exactly. That's my point. because they're referencing this event, this traumatic event, but you don't know anything about it. So if you've seen seasons 1, 2, and 3, you're like, come on, man, what happened to Foggy? If you haven't seen the show,
You got everybody hooked for like 8 episodes.
if you're seeing seasons 1, 2, and 3, you're like, wait, how is Fisk mayor already? What happened? Like, even if you know the comics, right? You're like, wait, he's mayor? What happened? Like, if you see Frank Castle and you're like, you remember this dynamic that they have, you're like, why is Frank down here? And then you see Muse and you're kind of like, what's this guy doing? This looks pretty grotesque, right? Yeah. Questions. That to me is what premieres are about, is to get you asking questions. And now, like I said, narratively, you can go forward, you can go back. You're free to explore this. But by waiting till episode 4, I think it made this episode more difficult and more boring for a lot of people, because it was like another episode where Matt's not in the suit. Another episode where it's like, why are we jumping around? And like, I can totally see the seams where like the Fisk part was clearly shot in the original version because it's kind of lighthearted. And then like the Punisher piece is clearly shot later because that's definitely like the Netflix show. And like, I think you could have avoided a lot of that had you just let out of the gate with this.
It's like having a show called Batman and all you see is Bruce Wayne. I want to see Batman. And everything about the Bruce Wayne show is dope. But where's Batman? And if Batman disappoints, you're gonna lose people. People are gonna drop off, and it's pretty much showing in the rate, not in the viewership.
So you just got to be thinking of like an idea if someone wanted to try this. Imagine you put together a Batman show. You managed to keep under wraps that it was a Batman show. So you're pitching it as it's a crime drama, it's a city drama. The title doesn't say anything about Gotham. And in the first episode, you write it in such a way that no character speaks to any other character with their name. So you don't even know you're looking at Bruce Wayne. You don't even know that you're being introduced to Harvey Dent or Selena Kyle or whoever you want, right? You're just going through this episode. You're like, who are these people? And you kind of follow them. It's kind of interesting. But then at the end of that premiere, you drop in this little Easter egg, kind of like Matt training on the roof, where it becomes crystal clear in 1 second that everything you just saw for the premiere episode was, this is Gotham, this character is Bruce Wayne, and he's Batman. In that sense, you wouldn't have to show Batman in the premiere to hook people. All of a sudden, people be like, that's just a thing, like, wow, like what a hook. Like, you pulled me in, and now I realize I'm in this world, and I never knew that leading up to the show. I don't know, just stuff like that. I think you can do it, but to do it midway through the season, by now you've got all these people being like, come on, man, you call this show Daredevil, and he's clearly not Daredevil.
At least not yet. I mean, because again, that first episode of them showing him as Daredevil wasn't impressive, man.
No.
It wasn't impressive.
No. And now it feels more shoehorned in as you've gone along. It didn't look good. You know, it felt very Disneyfied, right? It felt very like, hey, we threw this together in post and rushed to get it up on screen. And yeah.
All dramatic.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the empty shell of the action staging that we used to have. So I think a real missed opportunity. And to the point about Friend and Foggy, I think for people who weren't familiar with this show, killing Foggy in the first episode was the worst decision ever, because they had no chance to connect with the character. And I think even for people who saw seasons 1, 2, and 3, it's been like 7 years. So like, to get rid of him in one scene,
to get rid of that dynamic and that conversation, to have us, if this was episode number 1, episode 4, if episode 4 was number 1, you would have hooked us in with what happened to Foggy, and you see these flashbacks, all these episodes teasing what's going to happen.
Exactly. Now you're living with Matt and Foggy
episodes
again.
Oh my God.
See, now you're living with that relationship again, so it's hooking everyone into when the trauma comes. Now it means something. Now it hurts everyone watching the show. That's to me is a fundamental storytelling mistake by Disney. Almost not trusting the audience enough to be like, hey, I don't think you guys can handle the show where the narrative is a lot of flashback and flash forward. It's like, yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. People watch TV like that all the time. Like,
have you heard of the show This Is Us?
Yeah.
Don't play games, yo. You know that's popular. That's the thing that everybody is love about the show, that they can sort of guess what's happening, and you don't get that you could do this with that. With Daredevil, and we haven't even we saw the dramatics again of the first episode, Again, that wasn't done impressively. Now you're gearing us up to see what this is gonna be. And if it doesn't live up to what we think it should be or whatever, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'll watch it because of the performances of Wilson Fisk and see what's happening with that dynamic there. I'll watch it because I'm a fan, because not all of it is bad, but if Daredevil is bad, that's not good.
I agree. And there's not much reason to, like, on the one hand, you're like, well, they brought some of the next Netflix people back, but right now they don't have a lot to stand on right this second for how good this is going to look if and when we do get more Matt in the suit, which I mean, I hope we don't have to wait till episode 8 or 9 to get there. But I mean, they're running out of time. I think I assume what we saw at the end of episode 4 was he is about to get back in the suit in episode 5. But before we leave, before I start trying to tear this thing apart a little bit, the conversation between Frank and Matt, still to me, like that to me was like, here's two guys who just get it. And like, you could put them on a street corner in broad daylight in any city and just say, hey, make up stuff for 10 minutes. And it would turn into something epic. It was amazing. I thought it was an amazing conversation. And it just was like, that alone probably was enough to carry a lot of this episode. But what did you think of sort of how they staged it and what they talked about this time around?
I think it was sort of a pickup from previous, especially from the rooftop. The rooftop episode, I think it was a pickup from that, and obviously mentioning certain things that had happened that I guess would further along the conversation and get us interested into what. See that conversation. Imagine that would have been the first episode, man. That would have, and him mentioning Foggy, and then and us not knowing what happened. Oh man, yeah, man. I was trying to find you hit on it, Brian. I was trying to find what was wrong with this episode for me. And there's been previous series that we talked about, like for example, what's that show on Netflix that was Heroes?
Jupiter's Legacy.
I talked to you a long time ago about it. Wow, Jupiter's Legacy. And I said, if they would have switched certain episodes around, maybe this could have worked a little bit better. I just, hopefully they can balance out these interactions between them, and it's not always them arguing all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but this is not a pure argument. See, that's why I like this conversation, right? Yeah. Because it's like there's such a level of empathy amidst this that I think makes this conversation really compelling, but distinct from what they have talked about in the past, is when the Punisher connects the death of his children, death of his family, specifically his son, to Foggy. That's the moment where it's like, yeah, they're arguing, but they're not really arguing with each other. It's more Matt's angry and doesn't know where to put it, and Punisher understands what that's like. And that's where you see them connect. Even though they see the world differently, they have this real understanding that only people that have lived this can relate to. And I think that's what makes the scene compelling when he breaks Matt down emotionally, because he can get at that and really no one else. Like, ironically, Matt dates a therapist. I don't think there's any way that Heather Glenn would have been able to get at the truth of this, whereas Punisher can do it in 30 seconds. And I think that's part of what makes it compelling, not to mention the fact that, like we said, these key characters have incredible chemistry. Like the one piece of that wasn't in this episode that I actually probably would have put in episode 2 would have been the conversation between Matt and Fisk, right, in the diner. Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing in episode 1 I thought that was truly great. But I think he could have done that in a flashback in episode 2. But again, it's like when you see that, when those key characters come together, they understand how to bring those scenes to life in a way that, at least so far, not many of the new additions to the show have been able to capture. And that's why I made this point when we saw episode 1. I said, how much are you missing Claire Temple, and how much are you missing Stick, and how much are you missing Karen and Foggy actually just sort of debating in that old office, like what, and Ben Urich, in many ways, like that was the lifeblood of the Netflix show. And so before the show came out, when Disney said like, hey, we're kind of tamping down those conversations and trying to go more action, I was like, like, I don't know if you understand part of what made that show great. And now come to find out we haven't gotten much action, and what we have gotten hasn't been very good. And yeah, we've gotten a few conversations, but the new characters haven't really done much with their conversations other than maybe Daniel Blake, depending on how you feel about that, the Michael Gandolfini character. But it's rough, man. I also think it's unconscionable that Muse is supposed to be the primary antagonist of this show, that he has not had a moment until midway through the season. And I heard the showrunner saying Muse is going to be in season 2 as well. So that makes me feel like, I feel like we're getting mouse-aganded on this show, because the original version was an 18-episode crime, basically Law and Order crime drama with Matt Murdock. And remember the rumors where he's not really in the suit at all from a lot of the show.
Yeah.
I think we are getting most of that show. That's what it looks like to me. And they told us, like, hey, no, we chopped it up. We redid it. We brought back the old people. But that's not really what I'm seeing. I see a little bit of lip service to the old people at the start of this show. I see some quickly staged, badly CGI'd action. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing is what you originally shot. That's what it looks and feels like for the most part.
Yeah. That's the one thing I didn't enjoy about Netflix series that they offed Ben Urich. He was a great character.
You're drawing attention to it with Bibi too, because obviously she's new media. And I don't hate the little vignettes of New York that they're doing, but like every time I see it, I'm remembering, is it Vondi Curtis Hall, I think, who played Ben Urich in the series, and like just the gravity that he brought to that part. And I'm like, man, I understand why they did what they did, because that scene is dramatic. Yeah. Spoiler alert when Fisk comes to his house. But yeah, it is one of those, you can't really go back once you do that with a character like that. So, you want me to go the other way? Why I think this ended the show?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think Disney's been dancing around this in the first couple episodes, but they really moved it center stage in this episode to the point where I said, you guys really just are all about that, aren't you, in the end? And you just are going to go down with that ship. Episode 4, to me, also laid bare that I believe one of the primary, if not the primary focal points of making this show was to promote the agenda. And I have no time for that in my Daredevil show. They clearly were hinting at it. Wilson Fisk is Donald Trump. If you can't see that, you're not paying attention. His supporters wear a hat, which clearly is meant to be a dark blue riff on a MAGA hat. In episode 4, what beats you over the head with this is Fisk standing there talking to his chief of staff about all the things he wants to do, but not being willing to take all the steps politically to do them, and then being told, no, you can't do that because you got to do this first. Yeah, he's like, well, why? He's like, why? I just want to do. And I get it. This show was shot before Trump was elected, but he was obviously running as the opposition candidate to most of what Disney's politics would be. So them making Wilson Fisk into that character so blatantly and using that as like a platform to say what they want to say about that individual in real life, to me is, I don't need it. And I think then, to me, they tripled down on that with, is it Leroy Bradford, the petty thief that Matt is lobbying for in this episode?
Yeah.
That is a very, very long scene for that guy to deliver a manifesto about the criminal justice system and basically California's view of justice over the last few years, which is basically like, you should just let all the petty criminals do whatever they want because it costs the system too much and you're not interested in helping them. Like, I'm not saying whether you should agree with that or should disagree with that. I'm saying Disney chose to make that a centerpiece of this episode, and ultimately a centerpiece of why Matt Murdock goes back to being Daredevil. Because you're supposed to look at that scene, him sitting there being like, you're right. As like, now he thinks the system, he's trying to live within the system, and now he's giving up on the system again because of what this guy said. That to me is terrible. Like, it's just like, it's why. There's so many other vehicles. You had the Foggy thing, which was more classic of like why the system is not enough. You didn't need this, but they wanted it in there. And when you put them back to back, and then you layer on that crooked cops have been a part of TV and film forever, but it's very clear that the Punisher fanboys with his logo, that is a blatant commentary on police brutality and sort of the post George Floyd world. And but like, I get it. Disney, I know where you stand on all these issues, but I don't need that permeating my Daredevil show right and left and driving the narrative storyline of the key characters, which is what they've chosen to do. And I think I'm used to Hollywood having politics at the margin. Like, I'll give you an example. So Michael Bay did Transformers, right? There's nobody more pro-industrial military complex than Michael Bay. He has the best relationship with the U.S. military. He gets all access to their vehicles all the time. Just look at any of his movies. But there's a scene in the original Transformers where clearly George Bush president character has his feet up saying, fetch me a couple of ding-dongs, right? I'm used to that. Michael Bay thinks George W. Bush was a buffoon. Fine. That's clearly what he thinks, but it doesn't affect the storytelling. It's just a little moment, comes and goes. When you start to move this stuff to me to like, this is what a Daredevil show is supposed to be about, I'm out. And I think so many other people that already were teetering, if this in fact is carried through, which I think it will be, this will sully this show to the point of lack of recognition. Because the Netflix show, I never really felt that either way. There wasn't a moment in like Daredevil.
You were immersed in that world
where they are riffing on the politics of the time and how we should feel about that. That's not what I ever felt watching those shows. But with Disney, that's all you feel watching so much of their programming now. And I think this show, I was like, yeah, so you brought back Bernthal and you brought back Cox and you brought back D'Onofrio. And what you really wanted to do was distract us. What you really wanted to do was distract us from the point that you just wanted another forum to pound this into people's heads. I'm out. To me, that was when I saw that in episode 4, I was like, you writing this is why this show will be a dead weight on the legacy of the Netflix classic.
I think what we'll see moving forward is perhaps a continuation of what this episode 4 should have been episode 1, and the next episode 5, will be episode 2. I would suspect seeing some Poindexter, perhaps him escaping. I don't know,
but that's late. I'm just saying that's late, man.
That's why.
In 4 and Bullseye comes back 4 episodes after we last saw him to escape.
It's going to put the focus on that whole situation, other than the situations that you just described in terms of our own world. You know what I'm saying? The things that they're pointing out. And that's the whole point, man. When we watch stuff, we want to escape, sort of, right?
And I can give you an example the other way where I actually really enjoyed season 2 of Lioness on Paramount Plus, the Taylor Sheridan counterterrorism series. But like, you know, his politics are kind of the other way. And he has Morgan Freeman deliver like 2 of the most scathing monologues about the Biden administration. I mean, he doesn't say it, but he clearly is talking about Joe Biden and his lack of leadership and what a joke the country's become on the national stage. And it's Morgan Freeman saying it. So you're kind of just like riveted at this, like, but at the same time, you're like, it goes on for like 4 minutes and you're sort of like, okay, I get it. I get it, Taylor. Like, I get that you're not happy with the world from 2020 to 2024, but like, you know, your show is really about this sort of elite counterterrorism unit that's sort of in trouble and trying to succeed against difficult odds. And it's like, you pause to make sure we knew your personal politics and like put a giant spotlight around that. And I'm like, it's a little much. Like, as much as I think that the season is good, I'm like, that's a little on the nose. You know, that's what I mean by like, it's both ways where I just feel like I get taken out of the experience sometimes when it's very clear that you're using it as a platform, you know, to speak on today. So no, I don't think this show's recoverable. I really don't. I think it's a shame. I think there'll be high points and high moments, but I don't think it's recoverable.
Yeah. What's the viewership like?
Haven't seen for like episode 4 yet. Like we said, it just says, you know, all you have are the comps kind of coming out of the gate, and the comps are all bad. Like I said, it's, you know, Agatha was almost 2 million higher than this. Oh, Acolyte. I can't remember the name now. Like, blotted it from my memory. Acolyte was like, I think it was like 3 or 4 million higher than this early on. And that viewership cratered, but still, it's just, this show is not hitting. It's not grabbing, you know? And I think whatever you want to say, this show is kind of, you know, it's sort of like a hybrid monster where you can sort of see the old show, see the new show. It's taken too long to develop. it's like almost nobody is really happy right now. That's what I'm kind of reading online. Like everyone's kind of like asking for something different almost, and like nobody seems satisfied with what they're getting. So that's why I'm like, whether it's Echo, Brave New World, like Disney
Yeah.
kind of did it again, man. This is like what Disney's doing with their stuff these days.
In our show notes, Brian, you said Netflix takes shots at Marvel
Yeah.
over old Daredevil. What
Whoa.
happened?
Yeah, I don't even know uh, why Ted Sarandos felt the need to weigh in, but he said he was talking about the relationship between the Netflix streamer and Marvel. So this is before it reverted to Disney. Quote, on our shows, we were dealing with the old Marvel television regime, which operated independently at Disney, and they were thrifty. Every time we wanted to make our shows bigger or better, we had to bang on them. Our incentives were not well aligned. We wanted to make great television. They wanted to make money. I thought we could actually make money with great television. You want to work with people whose incentives are aligned with yours. When people are producing for you, they're trying to produce as cheaply as possible. When my incentive is to make as great as possible. And that's a lesson I take forever. As producers, whatever Marvel did not spend, they kept. So every time we wanted to add something to a show to make it better, it was a fist fight. End quote. Wow.
Here's my thinking. Netflix is doing dope with their IP, right? Everybody hears what they're saying is like they can do with what they're doing and making it great. Because here's the thing, and what we're experiencing now, you got to compete with what they're doing that everybody likes. So you want more money from us when perhaps who knows what the discussions were regarding getting those IP back, right? That this was only a limited time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the intent was at some point when we get it back, we're not going to feed into their greatness. You know what I'm saying? Because once we get it back, we got to compete with that stuff. So I can see that sort of situation happening, or that being the reason why they're not trying to give up the dough and make that show better with the ideas that they had in mind. And they were able to do it still.
Well, that's the point. It's a little rich for Ted Sarandos to say that when Netflix just dropped $320 million on the Electric State. So it's like, there are situations, plenty of situations. What did you give Zack Snyder to make Rebel Moon? Like, you have handed out a lot of big checks with limited return that look like garbage.
Yeah.
So let's not pretend that like money's the only thing that separated what you did from what could have been. And we know that Disney has plenty of budget now for this Daredevil show, and the first fight scene looked terrible. So, I mean, I understand what he's saying in the sense of like you want collaborators where everyone is kind of rowing in the same direction. But you could argue that we see time and time again, sometimes when budgets are tighter, that's when the greatness of creativity comes out because you have no alternative. And like, I don't look like, do you ever spend 1 second looking at the Netflix Daredevil show and saying like, boy, that looks cheap? I don't.
Nah,
No, I don't.
I mean, and Brian, and here's the thing. I know somebody who was on set I think she was a grip. I've been trying to get on the show, but I'm gonna try to get on the show. Let's see. But she was behind the scenes, setting up staging. She staged a no boo fight. She set up the lights and all that other stuff. She was Gaffer's team. She was in charge of them or whatever. You figure out a way. I think that's what great minds do. They figure out a way, and having the money, obviously, like you said, look what having the money looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. My only critique I've ever had of the Netflix series is that I do think 13 episodes became a little bit long. Like, I think that those are kind of like, maybe you could have done that in 10 and not lost any quality. But at the same time, they were very thorough, right? They were taking a comic book approach of like, we're going to give every character an arc and every character is going to have flashback backstory. And
each season was 13 episodes?
Yeah, it's 13. And each episode was an hour. So it's like the full on, like 13 hours.
It didn't feel like that with season 3. season one. Season two is where I had that problem with the hand
So
and stuff like that.
yeah, so I do think like if we in a perfect world, I think those seasons are probably 10 episodes as opposed to 13. But like I never felt like I was watching a scene and being like, boy, if only they had another couple $1,000,000 to clean that up. I never once thought that about the action, about the costumes, about the sets. Never.
I just thought it was just dope television.
Yeah.
And how they were able to make Daredevil look the way they did and pull off some of the things that they did with fight scenes. And it was just, and shout out to Charlie Cox's Daredevil. He's a player, man. He's like the Bachelor. You know, he just has this charisma about him that all the girls seem to. He in the comic books, he dated Natasha Romanoff.
Yep.
He dated quite a few, you know.
Yeah, man without fear. Although I will say, I'm assuming there's about a 98% chance that Heather Glenn doesn't make it out of this season.
Oh yeah. I was talking to Freddie. He was like, "Yo, she ain't making it out of it."
We've had the you're Fisk's therapist, and then we had the kiss of death where Matt is like, "Oh, I can't imagine my apartment without you." I'm like, "Well, you're about to." Like, it's like...
Brian, there was one aspect of Daredevil that you mentioned that I thought about a bit, and it was the absence of religion. What are your thoughts on? I guess when we saw the first 3 seasons of Daredevil, those were moments where he had conversations with certain individuals on a certain place in a certain area, to sort of, I guess, give him purpose for him to do what he wanted to do, or not what he wanted, but what he think he needed to do. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm definitely missing it, and I'm concerned as to why it's not in the show.
They certainly hint at it, though.
He like looks at a church at one point, but we have not seen a single interaction with, a priest. We haven't seen him do any of his quasi confessionals. We haven't seen him really have any robust debate around his faith, which that's one of the things that makes the Matt Murdock character different. It's one of the things that makes what he does as both lawyer by day and vigilante by night so interesting. Is that he has this Catholicism ingrained into him, and he spends a lot of the time seeking refuge in it, but also questioning in it. I do think it's conspicuous that this show has vacated that so far for the most part in the dialogue and in the interactions. And my fear is that Disney's afraid to go there, and somehow feels that like his Catholicism is generally more affiliated with politics that Disney doesn't subscribe to, and therefore they've kind of written it out of the character, because I don't think you can do that and capture Matt Murdock.
Yeah.
I don't know that you have to spend as much time as, say, season 3 did, where you gets revealed that his mom is actually working, spoiler alert, in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like, a church has always been a critical set to Daredevil. He returns to it.
Yeah.
For moral reasons, for physical reasons. And so I will be very disappointed if we get to the end of episode 9 and there has not been any integration of that part of the character. I will feel like, did Disney not understand that that is not something you can just cut out and leave behind and still call it Daredevil?
If they do that and we don't get that in this season, those will be one of the things that people point out, especially Daredevil fans, that people point out that Disney being Disney again, and the people behind these shows or these things and these characters aren't really truly giving us these characters as they are in the comics and who they are, and giving us all the ingredients that makes them them. I think ignoring that, based on all the other decisions that you've made in terms of what you want to show us and tell us and have us think and look at, that this would be something that you just don't want to touch.
Yeah, because it's not, again, I never found the Netflix version, or I never found the iterations of Daredevil as sort of promoting Catholicism. It's more that's his background based upon where he was born and raised. And it's the issue of faith in the system, faith in humanity, right? That's the issue, which is sort of not a commentary on whether this is the one true religion or not. That's not really the point. And so I don't think it should be any sort of third rail. It's just understanding that, like, for this particular character and this particular hero, it is one of the great conundrums that he's part of. And I again, similar to things I'm missing relative to the Netflix show, I am missing that aspect of Matt Murdock's character so far. Although you're right, they have sort of, he's walked by a church. Maybe that's a signal of, like, when he does become born again, which of course is a religious term, that includes a return to the church. I hope it does, because if it doesn't, then I'll say again, I don't think this is a true Matt Murdock anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see in the next coming episode, because he's getting ready to be Daredevil again. Kingpin went from eating egg whites to eating sausage and pasta, getting big again. That's a signal. That's a signal. I'm getting back to who I was. Big and ferocious. And having people do as I say. I want to get things done. I may have to use these tactics. I may have to be more imposing. I have to make people feel me when I come into the room. Did Vanessa ever say to him, don't hurt him or don't kill him?
Don't kill him.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the point of he hasn't technically broken that promise yet.
We were all wondering, like, what's going on? Why is his hands? Yeah, he's been going down at night, every night, and beating on this dude. That's crazy. But anyway.
Oh, you want to do Bernthal, actually?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The Punisher Return episode. Okay.
Yeah.
The special. Yeah.
He put a little bookend on him coming back.
Yeah.
He apparently said no originally. So in the original incarnation of this show, they asked him back and he said, quote, I didn't see it. I didn't see the version of Frank, and what they wanted from Frank didn't make sense to me, and I thought would not appeal to the fans and wouldn't be congruent. It was not something I was interested in doing, so we had to walk away, end quote.
So he read the script
for the 18 episode initial version, some of which you are seeing now. He read that and turned it down. He only came back when his showrunner took over the series, Dario Scardapani. And then he said, they really brought me into the conversation. We really got specific about where Frank is psychologically and where Frank's at physically. This makes me think him writing the Punisher special was a condition of his return. Doesn't it feel that way?
It definitely does, because I found it coincidental that the first time around, when he was doing Daredevil season 2, I think during that, they had greenlit a Punisher series.
Yep.
And now, in his return for Born Again, we're not even done with the series, and we get a greenlit special, a Punisher special movie for Disney Plus.
It's also interesting because we've seen the spin-off thing before. Like, think about the Echo situation, right? Where, like, they introduce the Echo character in Hawkeye, but then they say that Echo's going to get her own series. This makes me think that Bernthal really did call the shots on exactly what he wanted. That he wants it to be a special, which is shorter obligation for him. He does. I think there probably was a conversation about, like, do you just want to Punisher season 3? Like, do you want to come back and actually do a successor to your?
He was like, probably like, nah,
too much work. I don't think he wants to take up the time. So he's like, I want to write, produce, and star in a special length project. I bet with him saying no, and they were like, we have to get you back, and then his guy came in and was like, hey, you got to come back. He's like, well, fine, I'll come back, but this is what I want. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, man. Because listen, man, let's be real. Anything Jon Bernthal is in, he's great.
Agreed.
It's like, yo, how can you deny someone who has a strong opinion about a character? And he knocks it out the park every single time. Why? That's someone you sort of, I guess, trust that he can deliver on a vision that he thinks will work for a character like this, whom he's played before, and that everybody agrees is the best Punisher we've ever had live action.
Yeah,
it's just a no-brainer.
But I think it does underscore he had some leverage here, and he used it. He used it.
Yeah, definitely. Hells yeah. Good for him, man. Good for him, especially when you see it and nobody else. I don't care if you don't see it, that's fine. But I see this, and I have track record to prove all of this.
Yep.
So it's an easy decision, really. If you say no to me, then good luck finding someone else who could probably be great as well, but it ain't gonna be me, and that's a bigger risk to take. Yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys thought of episode 4.